Testing, 1, 2. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à FEDCO. This is the meeting of the 1st of September, 2015. And welcome. If anyone would like to speak to any item that's on the agenda, if you could please fill out the form at the door and hand it to the clerk of the city, we'd be happy to hear from you. Declarations of interest, déclaration d'intérêt? None. Confirmation of minutes, June 29th, confirmation, adoption de procès-verbaux le 29 juin 2015. Carried. Information Technology Subcommittee, we have a presentation by a member of the public. We'll come back to that. City Manager's Office, Bureau du Directeur Général, Comprehensive Legal Services Report for the period of January 1st to June 30th, 2015. Received. Question, we'll get back.
Just a quick
one, okay.
I just want to, because in the past we used to have the Ontario Ombuds report, and do we know any other municipality, Mr. O'Connor, do have this comprehensive legal service listed?
Mr. Mayor, I can share with committee that I have shared on numerous occasions with other municipalities our format, and last year I believe Hamilton was the first to begin to produce a similar report on an annual basis, but we're the only two municipalities that I'm aware that do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Received. Status update, FEDCO committee inquiries and motions for the period of ending 21st August 2015. Demande de renseignement et motion. Received. Item number 4, appointment to the Downtown Business, Rideau Business BIA Area Board. Appointment of Hector Ray Noso and Christine Rose. Carried. Operating and capital budget, we have a presentation on that. Stage 2, Ottawa LRT preliminary engineering service contract. Carried. Real Estate Partnership and Development Office. Delegation of authority, acquisition and sale of land and property, April 1st, 2015 to June 30th, 2015. Carried, or received, rather. And then information items previously distributed. So we'll go back. We have item number 1, making the location of public washrooms within a public city facility available to the community. And the member of the public to speak to this is Joan Kuyak, Gotta Go Campaign. Is Joan here? If you'd like to take a seat, and welcome, Joan, and you have 5 minutes. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It's the IT on. It's an app for finding washrooms. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are speaking in favor of the motion. We're delighted that the city is interested in helping the public find public washrooms and know when they're open and what hours they're operating and whether or not they're accessible. At this point, we know there are a fair number of city washrooms, municipal washrooms, but it's a bit of a mystery when they're actually open and how people can use them. And we think this is an extremely important step in getting a network of public washrooms in the city, and we are fully in support of this motion. Thank you.
Questions to the delegation? Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Thank you very much. On the report?
I have a question to staff.
A question to staff. Councillor Taylor.
Just briefly, and for my clarification, the first line of the report says that staff be directed to produce an app, but then it goes on to say that our expectation is fully that the public sector, the private sector out there is going to consume the data and produce the app. So I just want to clarify who's producing the app. I mean, if the public doesn't take the data and produce it, are we producing it?
Okay.
Sorry, is that to staff or to Councillor Shirelli?
Well,
who's from staff?
Whoever would answer it, I guess.
Well, I'll answer it then. Okay, the plan is that the city will be responsible for ensuring those produced, and the first step in the production is that IT and Service Ottawa staff will work with their app development pool of developers and see if that can be done that way for a couple of $1,000s, that range of budget. And Councillor Weeper has been in discussions with the Colitis Society, and I think the first step is going to be to see if a collaboration can happen there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, because on the report it says there's no financial implication for the city, but you're saying there is.
No, there's no new money required by the city because we have budget within Service Ottawa and Donna Gray's shop to develop apps using the open data community.
Okay, on the report, carried. Thank you. The next item is the 2015 Operating and Capital Budget Q2 Status Report. We'll ask the Treasurer to come forward. I have a couple of opening comments, and then we'll ask the Treasurer for her presentation, and then open it up to questions and comments. J'aimerais faire quelques commentaires à ce sujet. To focus our discussion, let's remember that we're talking about a mid-year status report today and not making decisions about budget 2016. As you've heard, a mid-year deficit is something that happens from time to time when there are unforeseen circumstances. And we've already taken some actions to address this. Nous avons déjà pris certaines mesures pour faire face à la situation. Municipal budgets, as we all know, are unique. We're not able to take on debt to pay for operating expenses, and we're not legally allowed to run deficits like the other two orders of government. That means we simply need to find a way to bridge this gap. And I want to be perfectly clear, I have every confidence that this short-term deficit is manageable. I have no doubt that we will end 2015 with a balanced budget just as we have for the last 5 years. We've done it before and we'll do it again. And at the same time, we need to live within our means. We need to take a responsible look at our priorities and have healthy conversations about the direction we should take together. The easy way out of financial challenges in government is to raise taxes. No heavy lifting, no creative ideas, just raise taxes. In the upcoming budget process, our goal is to challenge ourselves and our staff to save and spend tax dollars more effectively and efficiently. I'm proud of the city's financial track record over the last few years. Our last 5 budgets have offered a fair, balanced, predictable approach through greater community investments in public services, a tax rate that respects the budgets of families and businesses, and a AAA credit rating with our excellent debt-to-asset ratio. We need to continue to offer that same fair, balanced approach. To put things in perspective, the City of Ottawa has a budget of over $3 billion. The shortfall represents less than 1.3%. In an organization of this size, I have every confidence that efficiencies can be found. Étant donné notre budget de 3 milliards de dollars, je suis très confiant que nous pourrons trouver les économies pour corriger la situation. And of course, these solutions will not run counter to our shared commitment of providing great services at an affordable tax rate. Our big priorities and core businesses are not at risk, but there are always ways we can be more efficient. And members of FEDCO have a unique responsibility as chairs of committees and boards and deputy mayors. You all have responsibility for ensuring that your budgets within your departments are kept in line and we find the most efficient way of delivering those services. Nous travaillons ensemble pour trouver des façons innovatrices à ces défis et rencontrer les attentes des résidents. We need to be innovative in order to find solutions. That requires the hard work and discipline our residents expect of us. I look forward to collaborating with members of council to meet these expectations, and I thank the Treasurer and the City Manager for the work that they have done to find solutions to the shortfall so that we end the year with a balanced book. Treasurer, the floor is yours for your PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just doing a very short presentation today. Just want to provide some context to explain what are the factors that are resulting in the forecasted deficit, how we're planning to deal with it both in the short term, 2015, and then going into 2016. As a reminder, though, because a number of you have never actually been sitting around this table when we've had a deficit, we have had significant deficits in the past. In 2009, we had a $34 million deficit at the end of the year. In the previous year, 2008, we had a $25 million deficit. So this is not something new. It certainly isn't something we like, but it's something we've dealt with before, and we do have a plan in place to deal with it going for the rest of 2015. So the $34 million forecasted deficit for the tax-supported services, and to remind you, this does not include transit, police, library, and public health, stem from three major sources. The first one is the winter maintenance activities. We were already in a deficit on a calendarized basis, not in an actual deficit, but based on what we thought we would spend for the first part of winter in 2015 at the end of Q1, which we reported to you. And that stems from basically the extensive cold and the storms that actually happened at the end of 2014 that had carried over and had to be cleaned up in 2015. The second largest contributor to the deficit is the arbitrated settlements that we've had for QP 503 and for CIPP. These came in at roughly 0.5% more than we had forecast and included in the budget. And those, as they go back to 2014, it has a larger impact in this year because we're making up for what we didn't have in 2014 and 2015 as well. And then the third item was additional WSIB work-related illnesses that were added. The provincial government announced in 2014 that they were phasing in the addition of a number of cancers for firefighters retroactive to 1960. And while we knew at the time that this was going to have an impact, we had no way of judging what was the magnitude of that impact on the City of Ottawa. And even with the number that we have today, we're not certain that this is the final number. And that's an additional $4 million that we're anticipating to be paid out for those cancers. And as you would have read in the report, this isn't the end of it. Next year there's another cancer being added to the list, and the year after that another cancer. So, as the Mayor mentioned, the $34 million for this portion of the budget really represents 1.8%. So, it's not even at the 2% level yet. So, while some people would say 1.8 is pretty good forecasting, we would like to be a little bit closer than that. The $7 million forecasted deficit in the rate-supported services stem from two areas. The first one is really, and this is the most significant one, is the cold weather and the issue of dealing with all the frozen pipes in the first part of winter of 2015. So the increased overtime, the work that had to be performed by the staff in environmental services to deal with that issue is what's causing the majority of this deficit. Again, we have some decline in the water rate, in the water consumption, but overall you're doing much better in this area than you were last year. Last year you ended up with an $18 million deficit in rate, and if we didn't have the issue of the cold weather, you would be looking at something like a $3 million deficit from lower water consumption in 2015. So that's what is causing the problem. How we're going to deal with it is a couple of strategies that we are putting in place. First of all, we put in place a hiring and discretionary spending freeze. And while the city manager sent the memo out in July, in fact, when we got the information about the arbitration awards, we he did an announcement to Senior Management Committee in June announcing that, in fact, this was being put in place immediately. So we have built what we think we can achieve in from a hiring and discretionary spending freeze into the forecast already, but as I've told some of you who've talked to me offline, typically people tend to be a little bit conservative in that. I expect there actually to be more achieved than what we've got in the forecast. But it's not going to be enough to offset a $34 million deficit. That would be pretty significant. So what we have in this report is, I think it's 4 additional reports which look to return money back to your citywide reserve and to your rate reserve to cover the deficit. So we've got capital project closures, and in all cases the departments have said these projects can be closed, there's a little bit of money left, or they've got a reduction because the tenders came in lower, or there's another project that they can use the money from. So they have asked us or provided to us a list of projects for reductions to take place. This returns an additional $10 million to the citywide reserve and I believe $20 million to the rate reserve. The way this process works is at the end of the year we close the books, we come forward to you prior to the audit starting with a disposition report, and that report will recommend at that time, with whatever the deficit is, that we use the reserves that we have available to cover that deficit. So it does not become something that gets carried forward into the 26 budget and has to be dealt with as part of the taxation in 2016. So the disposition or the report will deal with the entire deficit as part of 2015. But we do have some carry forward items as a result of this that go into 2016. We do have to add to the list of pressures that we are compiling and coming forward with in the draft budget. We will have to add in the WSIB costs because this will be an ongoing thing. The winter maintenance accounts, we need to recognize the fact that our new normal is not our old normal for winter and adjust those accounts accordingly so that we don't have are not continually running deficits in those accounts. And lastly, we need to adjust for the water consumption estimates. There are a myriad of other smaller adjustments that we will be making to try to get the 2016 budget to bring it closer to the actual to the budget. Someone had mentioned to me, why aren't we dealing with the sponsorship because that's causing us a pressure. We will be dealing with that in 2016. So everything that you see in this report that talks about it being a pain point in 2015, we will be carrying forward and dealing with as part of the 2016 budget. And that is the conclusion of my presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you very much. Just one item I'm going to ask Councillor El-Shantiri to move it. The issue with respect to the $1.2 million on social services, that is 100% the responsibility of the province because they implemented this SAM system, as we all know, and it has not gone smoothly. And it should not be a burden of Ottawa taxpayers to pay for that. So I've asked Councillor El-Shantiri as a motion to deal with that specific item, and then we have a list.
The motion that the mayor be directed to write to the premier to demand 100% rebate to all funds spent by the city to implement the province's SAM's social services system.
So that's before us. Thank you. And now I believe you're also first on the list, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Madam Treasurer. I seen on your second slide where you talk about the forecast winter maintenance activities, which is we know there's nothing we can do about this. The arbitrated settlement, surely to God, if anybody know about arbitration settlement, I should know. But when you talk about the additional WSIB work-related illness, like, I mean, are we speaking about a huge number in this 34 million, and what are we going to do about it if there's something we can do about it? Because sometimes I like to put things in context because we see a big number, but then when we look at other municipality, whether legal services or other, we see ourselves we're below the threshold. So can you just enlighten me about this item?
Certainly. So the provincial government announced in 2014 they were adding these additional cancers on, and they were now deemed to be associated with your work, so they were eligible. You were eligible to be covered from workers' insurance for it. If you died, you would get a payment from WSIB. We are what's known as a Schedule II employer, which means we don't pay an insurance premium to WSIB. We pay the cost directly, and WSIB just charges us an administration fee because our WSIB costs are so large. So we're basically self-insured. So they added these cancers on. So now firefighters, and this is only firefighters, who would have had these cancers in the past can now come forward and ask to be compensated. So widows can come forward. It's an ongoing process. We don't know how many are out there. AMO, when this came forward, identified somewhere close to $300 million was what they thought the impact would be across the province from adding these cancers on. There really is nothing we can do. The fire department is very conscientious about making certain that their safety equipment is the latest and is up to date, and that they have the self-contained breathing apparatus and all of those things. But at the end of the day, there's no way to predict what is going to, what type of cancers firefighters will get.
And also that goes back, I believe, many years back, right? You're talking about you're dealing with many years ago.
It's retroactive to 1960.
To 1960?
Yes. 60.
Oh, wow. Okay. Obviously, no money came from the province for this whatsoever, right?
No money came from the province from this.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor El-Shantieri. Councillor Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eli covered one of the areas I wanted to, and unfortunately the answer to the last question was no. I was going to ask whether there was any transitional funding in light of the retro effect, but apparently not. Just a couple of questions, clarification. On page 9 of the report, you talked about a $0.8 million deficit regarding provincial offences revenues. I'm assuming, but I just want clarity on that takes into effect, or takes into account, rather, the changes that are going to go in effect on September the 1 on distracted driving, which will almost double what the fine is for that sort of an offense. We just finished that blitz and did that comparison for people saying if you get caught after September 1st, your ticket would have been this. So does it take into account the fact that we'll have additional revenues in that regard?
It likely doesn't, because the forecast is built on what we saw as the trend. So the trend was in volumes and values of tickets. So not knowing how many of those tickets will be issued, all we do when we forecast is we say this is where we are today. If the trend continues exactly the same, if there's no change in it, this is what we see as the end result. We have seen tickets overall declining, so, and I know Councillor El-Shantieri and I have spoken to the police chief about that, and they're looking at trying to put an emphasis on traffic enforcement primarily for the rest of this year and for 2016. So that may generate more, but no, I don't think that's one of the things I'm hoping that comes in play, that reduces this deficit by the end of the year. But I do not believe we would have forecasted that those distracted driving tickets are now a lot more pricey.
Okay, so potentially if people misbehave, there's some more money there.
Well, we hope people don't misbehave, but yes, it would be nice to have more money there.
No, of course not. Now, Service Ottawa has been one of the things that we've used as a vehicle to achieve cost savings across the whole system. Are there still further enhancements that are in the pipe that will contribute even more savings? And if there are, is there a way to accelerate that process?
The original business cases that were provided to Council at the time staff made the recommendation for the Service Ottawa investment, those have all run their course and have been implemented, but I can say that consistent with what my comments and the Treasurer's comments were when we tabled the 2015 budget this spring, and we looked forward to the 2016 guideline document, that it would be we anticipated then, and I can tell you the work we've done since then confirms it, that there will be significant management productivity / efficiency saving targets that will be part of the 16, 17, and 18 budget context, and we are looking at what else could be mined from the tools that Service Ottawa delivered, but it'll be a broader call on management to find productivity and efficiency savings beyond the tools that Service Ottawa provided.
Okay, thank you for that. And the last questions are around overtime costs. We've seen that as a result of the amount of snow incidents that we had, as well as the frozen pipes situation, that a lot of this potential deficit is in and around overtime. Have we looked at other models rather than using the same employees? Have we looked at, for example, setting up casual pools or second shifts, people that would come in at regular wage as opposed to overtime wages? Have we considered any of those options going forward?
Could I just confirm, Chair, that question was with respect to winter maintenance?
It could be right across the board. I mean, winter maintenance is obviously the biggest, but we have the issue with the pipes. Time over time, overtime is an issue that comes up at budget time. So I'm wondering if we've looked at different models that would engage our employees, but in a different way.
I can say that that type of an approach is, there's more potential in certain parts of the city's operations, winter maintenance being one of them. We'll be coming forward with a report to Committee and Council in October with respect to the winter maintenance review, and there will be commentary on some of the staffing models. We are reviewing those as part of the winter maintenance function. That's our focus at the moment, but I'll ensure that focus is brought to some of the other areas of the city's operations where that perhaps could be a solution.
Well, I appreciate that. I knew that was going to be part of the recommendations and discussion coming forward to Transportation Committee on winter maintenance, but it's a pervasive issue. We see it right now in there, but we see it across the board on depending on what issues come up and what work needs to be done. So if there's lessons that can be learned from the winter snow review that could be copied or passed through the system, that would be appreciated.
Exactly, and one of the second area we would look at is parks and buildings maintenance.
Okay, thank you for that.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a list of about 9 line items in the adjustments that I'd like to run through. So if I run out of time in my first go-around, I'd ask for your indulgence to put me back on the speakers list. And I do want to say thanks to the senior staff and management for pulling this list together. Obviously, there's a lot of midnight oil having been burned here in order to help us deal with the deficit in which we find ourselves. I do have some questions with respect to a couple of the line items, trying to understand the implications of the adjustments that we are proposing to make. The first has to deal with the outdoor rink funds. I think we'll see a couple of staff coming up here.
Could Councillor Leeper just perhaps indicate the document and the page, just so we can follow along?
If you could refer to the...
Sure. I don't have the... most of these are going to be dealing with Document 5. I believe there's a couple in Document 7. In Document 5, I'm dealing first with line item 906236, a transfer of funds from line item 906180, as well as 906235. The format of the documents, unfortunately, is such that it makes it a little tricky to find, but I'll deal in general with what the line items are before posing the question. So the first line item that I'm looking at is with respect to 906236. It's been proposed to take $107,000 out of the Rink Shack Improvement Fund to put that money into a new Sens rink at Overbrook, and a little bit further down, 906235, they're proposing to take the uncommitted balance that's in the outdoor rink infrastructure fund and move it into reserves. My question for park staff is, what do we think the implications of that will be with respect to our planned rink infrastructure improvements, potentially even this winter? If this money is moved out, would it be fair to characterize, I think it was a $310,000 strategic initiative to improve rinks. That money presumably would no longer be entirely incremental to money that was previously committed, but part of that would now be making up a shortfall. can I get a feeling for what are the implications for infrastructure improvements to our outdoor rinks that won't be accomplished as a result of this adjustment, and the implications for the $310,000 strategic initiative fund to come?
Can I just comment on the issue on the SI with respect to increased compensation for the people that do the plowing? That's, I believe, an $80,000 increase on the operating side. So it's still there, and it was something I know that all members of council heard from these folks that have a very tough job plowing these and flooding these rinks. They've been frozen basically for, I think, a decade. So that still continues. I think you're talking about a capital expenditure, if I'm not mistaken, from the comment you've made.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, indeed, the SI in the 2015 budget is an increment to the grant that's paid out to rink operators, and that is not impacted by this. That is on the operating side of the budget. The rink infrastructure capital funding that is here was something that Council started to provide to the department back in 2004 when they approved the community-operated rink model. And at that time, we identified several locations throughout the city where prior to amalgamation the city provided rink operations directly. Accordingly, there often wasn't the appropriate infrastructure, most notably in Gloucester and in some rural areas. There wasn't the required infrastructure, things like a water source, a heated bunker to store the hoses, those kinds of things. And so this capital program has allowed us over the years, as we've negotiated with those communities, to provide those things that are required to have a community-operated program. The impact of not having this funding is, of course, not all rinks have been converted over to the community model, so there's still work to do, but it can only go as fast as communities are ready to take on these projects. As well, we get on an annual basis requests for other rink infrastructure, a light, some boards, a variety of things that communities want to add to their rink infrastructure. So those accounts would be used for that. I can say that since we have started our partnership with the SENS Foundation to build SENS rinks, these accounts have also served to help support the projects that we've taken on with the SENS, because even though they provide a great set of high boards for these rinks and an asphalt surface replacing grass or dirt, the city is responsible for a couple of things, putting in the infrastructure for water at the rink if it doesn't exist, or to bring it closer to the rink site, as well as lighting. And generally we have found with both Gilles Moret Park and Bayshore Park that those have ranged in the $200,000 to $250,000. And this has been, in those years where this has been a priority, we have gone to this account as well. What is being proposed in the transaction that the council has identified is to do the same thing to help support our contribution towards the next SENS rink.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do I have time for one more along those lines?
Yeah, we have 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
In document 5 at line 903 and 05.
Just a question, and maybe it'll help my colleague here as well, because I think it'll be a better place for those questions, Mr. Mayor, to be asked directly with the staff, a meeting between the councillor and those staff on these questions. I think that will go a long way, because I can see the benefit of those questions, but really is a staff-related explanation, because some of us around, we work with the outdoor rink, and we were happy with the way the funding available and help us to take over. So I think is helpful if you have one-on-one with the staff on this file. My advice is...
I think, well, the councillor is entitled to ask. I know he has, I think, about 30 questions. We probably won't get to them all, and a lot of those can be sent directly to the treasurer for response. So the floor is yours. Thank you, councillor.
Yeah, thank you. And the vast majority of the questions that I have after doing a line-by-line of these adjustments have been sent directly to staff and will be taken offline. I think some of these are the bigger questions that the public is going to be interested in hearing the discussion around. So I have another one before I ask to be put back on the speakers list. In document 5, there's a line item 903-105. Unfortunately, there's no page number with respect to IT class registration system, in which it's proposed that we would take $386,000 of funding that was previously authorized for that project, 32% of the total authorization, to go back into reserves. And I'm just wondering, what are the implications for rolling out a registration system that meets with what the residents of Ottawa are looking for in terms of ease of use, et cetera?
Through the Mayor, the $386,000 are funds left over from the initial implementation of class at amalgamation, and we have carried this balance to assist us with the periodic requirement to spend capital to improve the system. Just recently, for example, we replaced 4 servers in partnership with the IT department, and this has gone to things like replacing PIN pads at our front counters, cash registers, those kinds of things. We are, as part of the 2015 budget, Council did approve strategic initiative for the complete replacement of the class system, and we are hoping to move to a outside the city hosted system, which we think will greatly reduce our requirement for capital. One of the implications of losing any capital funding is that if out of that RFP we end up with an in-house system again, there may be a need for capital funds that aren't contemplated in the project that we're undertaking. The immediate, though, is that until we replace the system, I guess this is a reasonable assumption that these funds are surplus at this time.
Thank you, sir.
Still have a minute 40.
There's a line item 906-514 that deals with transit capital, transit priority projects. Again, it's in document 5. The transit priority corridor 2012.
You might want to wait on that one because there's no one here to answer it. So go to another one that someone's here for.
The 907-912 deals with funds that are proposed to be changed from a raw sewage pumping station upgrade. I don't know what that project is, that are going to have to go into a much more urgent gas leak issue that we're having, I presume, from the description at ROPEC. I'm wondering, by moving the $650,000 out of that pumping station upgrade, what are the risks that we run with respect to not doing that upgrade at that station? I presume the work is important. What are the implications of not doing it with the budget that has been allocated to it?
Mr. Weir.
Chair, through you to the councillor, we have looked at this situation and are redirecting money out of the ROPEC digester upgrade project. There is no consequence effectively to the raw sewage pumping station because the funds are just trying to balance where we are this year, and we do not anticipate that there will be any impact to planned works this year. We will pick up that work as part of future work at that raw sewage pumping station.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. You still have time.
Again, I think this is in document 7 at line 907-738. There's a proposal to take $250,000 out of long-term care building projects and move them into emergency projects or more urgent projects in other categories of building. I think government, parks and rec, et cetera. What is the nature of the work that we have to do more urgently at those other categories of building? And then what are the implications of not doing the long-term care projects that we had budgeted for?
So the long-term care project actually will proceed. It's the replacement of the generator at Carlton Lodge. So the tenders came in lower, so they are just taking that money from that and redistributing it to other areas. I don't know the nature of the other work that they'll take place, but it's basically a pot of money that they get for a variety of facilities, and when they don't need it in one type, they move it into another.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see a recognition of the need to adjust the money that we're forecasting as a regular need for winter maintenance, and the implications really of the fact that there is no new normal, I believe, in our climate. We're seeing that here in Ottawa and around the world. I'm wondering on what basis, though, the city is planning to adjust its forecasts. We see quite dramatic fluctuations in temperatures from winter to winter. We've had 2 very cold ones, but they were preceded by some very mild ones. We've seen that the freeze-thaw cycles are more frequent and more dramatic, which is leading to deterioration of a lot of infrastructure. Are we getting information from insurance bureaus or AMO or FCM or others that are giving us some sort of concrete measures by which to forecast, the new needs as opposed to, dare I say, back of an envelope? We think we might need 10% more or 20% more. Are we getting any kind of guidance on this from outside sources?
We'll ask Mr. Wiley to come forward. I think there's a seat there.
Through the Mayor to the Councillor, yes, we do have a very robust forecasting system. We contract a meteorologist company, and they do provide us with forecasts for the upcoming winters, and they do trend analysis as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch from whom we get that, or several sources?
Well, it's actually a contracted meteorologist company that we contract, and they pull from 7 or 8 different models, different forecasting models, to come up with an aggregate model, giving their expertise as well to forecast what's coming up for the winter.
Thank you. And certainly in my role as Chair of Environment Committee, I'll want to be working with staff to see if there is anything, we are already reviewing this, see if there's anything we can do to reduce the impacts and therefore costs of the frozen pipes, whether it's although we do send quite significant advance notices to people for whom this is a regular problem. Is there anything we can do to bump that up, to improve the information to them, so we're not finding ourselves as a city and they are not finding themselves as homeowners with this problem, even if that comes at a minor additional water cost to them. Those were the key areas. I think it is, the second particular one was on water rates. Just to highlight, I suppose, for everyone, as we know, we are into this process now where our rates, water and sanitary rates are being reviewed, and as we can see from this budget, that's a key piece of work that we'll want to engage with the citizens on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hughley, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions, if I may. Kevin Wiley's here. Maybe where the Treasurer identified the snow budget being the number one culprit here. For those that don't know, there's an audit underway, and your staff have been working very well with the audit department on that. Are you able to give us any indication today on the hope that there'll be some projected savings going forward and better processes?
Through the Chair, I believe as Mr. Kirkpatrick mentioned, we will be coming in to TRC on October 7th with the results of our winter operations review and giving some options for reducing those costs, both some options that'll be seamless to the public and potentially some options that'll look at level of service.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have would be for Mr. Weir. It's becoming an annual thing to be told that the rate budget is off because we got lower than anticipated water usage. I'm curious, when we came out with the program to reduce lower water, like low flow valves, things like that the city got very involved with, did we not do any estimates of what the impact would be on the water consumption?
Chair, through you to the Councillor, the impact and the demand reduction is more a change in equipment, in infrastructure, in washers and dryers, and social changes than it is as a result of the water efficiency program per se. There are structural changes that are happening out there in the homes and residents that are having a much greater impact than our current efforts at educating and taking best advantage of our infrastructure.
And I think we're also fixing leaky pipes as well, are we not? And you're seeing some benefit from that?
Chair, through you to the Council, we certainly are. And the other important part of this is to understand that we're also putting off major infrastructure renewals and expansions as a result of this demand. So there is a financial reward for the city, if you will, for continuing to encourage this lower demand on consumption.
I'm just trying to figure out a way that when we get into the budget in a couple of months from now and the rate budget gets stable, you won't have to come before us and tell us lower than expected water consumption has led to this. Is there something we're doing to try to get a better picture on where water consumption is going so that you can budget your department according to that?
Yes, absolutely. We're continuing to look at trends both here and across the province in an effort to try to take advantage of opportunities and ideas and approaches to increase the predictability and reliability of those estimates.
Thank you. The other point I want to, and I believe you'll be the one to address this as well, there's a mention in there that one of the contributors to this is the extra frozen pipes we encountered last winter. They were on new homes as well as old homes, and it had more to do with how deep the frost went. Is that correct? And we would hope it's going to be a one-of kind of a thing, but it's hard to predict, correct? But we hadn't had it before.
Sorry, to the Councillor. Yes, we monitor very closely in terms of those impacts. I think the other part to make sure we understand is that when the Treasurer is referring to frozen pipes, not only is she referring to the frozen pipes going up to people's homes, but also to the frozen pipes within the city's infrastructure or within the city's right-of-way. I was looking at some information, and for instance, in March, we more than doubled our annual average of water main breaks in March within the right-of-way. So I think the impact of frozen pipes is not just to the frozen services going up to people's homes, which we are working with, but it's also within our own right-of-way, and that's presenting us doubly, if you will, or hitting us doubly with impact on those services and operational costs.
Have we identified anything we can do short of digging up all the pipes and burying them deeper? Anything we can do to help prevent that in the future, should we ever get that kind of a sustained freeze again?
We have an early warning system that we communicate with residents who have in the past experienced a frozen service. That's proven when we look at other municipalities, the percentage of frozen services is much lower here than in other communities, and in part due to that early warning system. We have monitors in the ground that are predicting that frost depth and allows us to indicate to residents and offer them a run water cost that is much less expensive to the city overall than having to repair or thaw a frozen service. So all of these means are to attempt to continue to provide certainty on service and reduce, while at the same time reducing the city's costs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Blais, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to go back to the fire and paramedic services very quickly. While we've talked about the insurance and the WSIB issue, the other aspect that's mentioned in the report is not achieving the staffing reductions for turnover. So I guess my question is why?
We're seeing right across the city actually lower turnover. So typically we have built, one of our budget policies is we built in 3% gapping, assuming that there would be enough turnover in the year that 3% of your compensation would not be used. What we're seeing is a little over 2% across the city, and when you compound that with what's happened in fire was when the awards, arbitrated awards came in, and they had to reduce the number of FTEs to accommodate for it. You reduce the number of FTEs. Some of those FTEs might have been ones that actually in the past were used to achieve your 3% gapping target. So those are gone now. So that creates a problem for them. In paramedics, it's the overtime and sick leave, because they're a 24/7 service, and this is one of the things we have to look at. Is we have 3 areas that are 24/7 services, and is that gapping target realistic? When someone is away, you actually have to backfill them. You don't have a choice to say, we'll let that position not be filled today. You have to call someone in to work that shift. So that's one of the things we'll be addressing starting in the 2016 budget.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And now, back to Whitner Maintenance. I'm glad to hear that there's a report coming up in October, but I understand that there's a tender out right now for snow clearing operations for this winter. So are some of those lessons learned incorporated into that request, or is there flexibility built into that to make changes after this report is approved by committee and council?
Through the chair, we've got a number of contracts we let out every year, and I think the changes, if you're referring to changes where we're shifting city resources to contractor resources or vice versa in order to save money, those types of changes would probably be a little longer term. We have to be ready for this winter coming up. We will have a plan. We'll have some items on the plan that'll be immediate saving items, but then we'll have some items on the plan that'll be more midterm and longer term items, and those will be dealing with some of the contractual issues that we have going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Blais. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to follow up on Councillor Leeper's line of questioning, because I think where he was going, as I understood it, is we're right now projecting year-end deficit of $41 million, and we don't have enough money. We're not allowed to have a deficit, and we don't have enough money in our reserve accounts to cover that deficit, so we have to cut our capital program in 2015 to put the money into the capital reserve in order to have that money to fund the projected year-end deficit, right?
That is basically what we're doing, yes.
Okay. So then I think what Councillor Leeper was getting at is, tell us what we're cutting out of the 2015 capital program. Like what is it that we're not going to be doing that we had planned to do in order to meet that, to take that money and put it in the capital reserve?
The budget closures and reductions that were coming from the departments are projects that are complete, or where they know they already have savings because tenders came in lower. So everything on that list is actually, they're recommending it, the works will happen. They're not foregoing any works. The list, the corporate list, which is we're looking at the citywide component of the capital projects, reducing that by 5%. Those are all very small cuts. So in some cases, you're taking $1,200 from a project that could be worth $500,000. So all of that work, we went back to the departments and asked, if we took this little bit of money out of that project, would you still be able to deliver it? And the answer came back as yes. We will be able to achieve that work with this reduction. And if something unforeseen happens between now and the end of the year, we've actually asked, as part of this, that I be given the delegated authority to not take that cut and to go somewhere else to find the money, so that the work is all to proceed. There's nothing that's actually supposed to not proceed as a result of this.
Okay, thank you for that. On the fire services and the issue of cancers, I just have to remind members of council that we asked for that, and I think one of our former colleagues actually pushed hard to add some of those cancers on. We did, so we bear some responsibility for that. But having said that, I don't know any of us really understood that it was going to be retroactive to 1960 and the impact on that. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to suggest that we actually approach the province and ask them to at least share in funding that issue for us, because they're the ones that brought in the legislation, that put it all on municipalities' books, and I think in fairness there should be some sharing of the costs associated with that. So just a recommendation. On the SAMS issue, And thank you, Councillor El-Shantari, for your help there. But frankly, that's what we've been saying since SAMS was implemented at the very beginning. Every letter I've written to the minister has contained that assumption in it. But what I don't understand in this 1.2 number that's showing up here is where we got that. I know we had that number in January, but I know Mr. Burry is not here today, but last week when I spoke with him, we still had money in our accounts. We hadn't depleted them all. So can you just tell me where are you getting this $1.2 million number?
I'll ask Marilyn to come up to provide that answer.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Deans, as you recall, in January, our estimate was that we would be over budget by $1.6 million because of the SAMS implementation. That is taking into account our gapping provision of $1.4 million within the department, and the $1.2 million is actually reflecting our commitment to the 1.4 gapping as well. So what we've been doing over the past several months is staffing up, as you know, in terms of our reports to committee. Every time we staff up in one area, we end up having a shortfall and vacancy of staff in another area. So that time in terms of one competition to the next is actually ending up saving a few dollars along the way. So that's why you're seeing the adjustment from the $1.6 million at the beginning of the year to $1.2 million now.
So it's not really all attributable to SAMS. It's a gapping provision in the department.
Exactly, and that's always been our issue because of staffing up. To meet the additional workload requirements of SAMS, we would not be able to meet the gapping provision.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. Just a couple of comments, Mr. Mayor. I think all members of council need to do a soul searching after we see this. This is the biggest projected deficit that I can ever remember, I think, in the city's history. And I don't think any of us really should be surprised at the financial situation that we're in right now, because when we built the 2015 budget, we built it with we were taking a lot of risks. We were taking a lot of chances. I remember at every committee meeting I asked the city staff, how much risk are we putting in here? That 3% gapping, staffing, we knew that was a risk. We knew that was taking a big chance. It was more of a chance we'd taken in the past. The sponsorship revenue, putting that in the department at $2 million, we pretty much knew that wasn't going to materialize. There's a whole lot of things. We wanted to bring in a 2% budget, and, to your point, Mr. Mayor, you said we have to make tough decisions. Well, we took chances. It was a hope and a prayer. We hoped the stars would align, and they didn't. So I think the message here for coming into the 2016 budget is we can't do this again. We can't put this much risk in the budget. We either have to make tough cuts, or we're going to have to have some form of a tax increase. Those are the choices, because you can hope that it doesn't snow, but it is the national capital of the coldest national capital in the world. It's going to snow and it's going to be cold, and I just don't think that it is good budget practices to build that much risk into our budget. And I think we are compounding our financial situation, and we're heading toward a financial crisis if we keep this kind of budgeting provision in place. I think we have to change direction. We have to learn from what we did in 2015, that we can't keep going in this way. We're going to have to switch directions, and we're going to have to make the tough choices the Mayor talked about, or look at our tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as you said at the beginning, this isn't the first time that we have been in a deficit, and I don't recall if there's been one at $41 million at halfway through. But one thing that we've learned over the years, and starting back, is the fact that we have these quarterly reports for exactly this reason. And I chaired the Ottawa Public Library Board for many years, and I can tell you that we always found that at the end of the first quarter, at the end of the second quarter, that we were in a position where we were being challenged. It allowed us to make the changes necessary. And, $41 million is a lot of money. It is a big pressure. But I think, I don't think, I know, that the people around this table, we all are leaders of this council, and others that are in the room as well. I see Councillor Kadri and his role that he plays, Councillor Tierney, and the role you play at the library. Certainly, I reached out on the weekend to Mr. Moser, and I talked to Mr. Mizzi and that. The planning budget is a small one, but there still are opportunities there. And I know that each one of us around the table are going to do that same due diligence, and I think that collectively, working with staff, I am not discouraged. I absolutely believe that we will reach the target that we need to come in where we need to be at the end of the year. But I would remind everybody, at a time we're in a recession, and we are in a recession. I mean, our city treasurer has been saying that, at least in conversations for the past number of months. And we all know in our wards people who have lost jobs, people that had really good jobs before. And I was talking to Councillor Taylor, and he's going to comment on what he thinks, one of the reasons he thinks that there are less people leaving than we anticipated. But surely adding pressure to the taxpayers at this time beyond what we stated that we were going to hold firm on, or actually less, is absolutely the wrong time to do it. It never is a good time, but now it's the worst time. And so as we deal with our growth targets being a little bit off, as we deal with the knowledge that we have at the end of June, this kind of a pressure, we just have to make sure that we are going to operate within the budget that we have, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I haven't got one taxpayer saying to me, Jan, charge me more for the same stuff you're doing in the city. I think there's opportunities that we'll talk about within our committees and that, and collectively about different ways to do business, to provide services, different service delivery models. But I'm going to say the same thing that I said in the last election, which, when was that, last fall? Last fall, okay? I have supported you in the last term on your position. I'm going to continue that, and I know that where possible, you're even going to, with our support, come in as better if we can. So I will not be at any point between now and December 31st considering, or when we actually approve the budget, considering that there will be an increase. One of the things that is an opportunity coming up is we're going to be going to the public earlier than we have in the past with the budget. The Nepean folks, we have a meeting on a Saturday morning at the Sportsplex in September. We are going to talk to the people, we're going to talk to them about the challenges, and we're going to look for their ideas. It's a great time for the whole city to get involved, whether you're running a business, whether you are an individual homeowner, or whether you live in affordable housing. So it's a challenge for sure to hear that $41 million, but I have every confidence that we're going to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. And certainly I understand that the funds are going to be adjusted to reflect reality. I think we've heard a lot of that about the snow budget, the public works budget, and certainly happy to hear that. And I know Councillor Chernyshenko has mentioned on the work that the Environment Committee is going to be doing, looking at the models for water, wastewater, that budget, and how it kind of rationalizes. A couple of quick questions, maybe some takeaways, and I'll start with you, Ms. Similuk. The costs and trends associated with long-term disability cost and the staffing pressures that we've seen as a result of that, I'm wondering, not now, not here, but if you could share with me, perhaps over the past decade, what our trends have been in long-term disability for staff and any associated cost pressures that's put on the organization. I know we're always trying to tighten our belt and our ship, and I think everybody's working towards that. But I want to see if there's a cost effect to that.
I can actually answer that now, because in 2005 we moved to a self-insured model for long-term disability, and that actually saved you significantly. Before, we had it provided through our benefit carrier, and the costs were going up quite significantly, but once we moved to the self-funded model, actually the costs went down, and they maintained over the years at, they haven't increased, I don't even think at the rate of inflation, but I will get you a detailed summary of that.
Okay, and aside from the, thank you for that, and aside from the costs, I'm also interested in knowing the number, right? Or perhaps maybe as a per capita of the percentage of city employees, because I'm sure that's changed as well. To Councillor Blai's question, and Councillor Harder just touched on it, I'm wondering if, in your kind of provisions for budgeting the gapping around compensation, if you've factored in, and you've been telling us, to Councillor Harder's point, that, we're in a recession, we've been in it for some time, we're hearing more of it today. Have you built into that gapping provision the reality that a lot of people, when we get into a recessionary model, hold off on retirement, either because they feel they could be hanging on to a job security item, or, it's uncertain times?
The gapping target was actually set probably 5 or 6 years ago at least at 3%, and it was based upon what we saw as our actual experience. At that time, when we had the policy and Council approved the policy, there's an ability for portfolios to move the gapping money around. So within Sue Jones's area, she can actually, if the gapping isn't being achieved in one area but there's excess in another, she can move it around within her portfolio. But what we're seeing really is there isn't that ability anymore, because it's being achieved in some areas and not in others. There's not areas where there's a lot more gapping than we would expect, and we have the problem with the 24/7. That really is the crux of it, is those operations that have to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there have to be people there. You cannot say, we just won't call in the ambulance driver, we'll just leave the ambulance in the bay. That, you have to put that ambulance out. So we will be adjusting next year for the 24/7, but we'll continue to watch to see if our experience in the rest of the city continues to be different. But I will tell you, we do have a number, when we have to factor in the number of retirements we know we have coming as well. That will assist us with our gapping target.
Okay. Mr. Chenier, revenue through Parks and Rec. I know we've talked a lot about sponsorship, hasn't really hit our expectations yet. But have there been any thoughts in your shop around collaboration with groups like Invest Ottawa, with the BIAs, with the Chambers of Commerce, about using what is essentially, I think you're the biggest probably holder of real estate in the city, you've got all the rec centers. Are there opportunities for us to look at, and I'm thinking of Ron Colvis Lakeside, where we had, pop-up Ottawa River rafting company. I mean, they're providing us revenue for being there. Are there other opportunities that anyone in your shop can look at to perhaps utilize some of this real estate asset we have to develop a revenue stream?
Through the Mayor, yes, absolutely, Councillor. We have looked, and then the Britannia one is a good example. We are constantly looking for either those kinds of programming partnerships that bring in private sector revenue, but we're also working with the real estate folks where we have surplus space in some of our buildings that we have leased out to physiotherapy clinics or other kinds of services that are compatible with the type of service that we offer, and that does bring in a stream of revenue to the department, and we could probably do more of it. And part of our sponsorship groups look at that is not just looking at sponsorships, but looking at service and presence on the property opportunities as well to try to bring in new revenue streams on that side.
Okay, so we're already doing it. Maybe we can try and be more aggressive in it. And then to our city manager, I guess I'll direct this to you, Kent, more because it's all encompassing. And this is with a specific reference to document 6, where we're kind of giving that 5% haircut to the projects that are out there outstanding. I'm assuming most of these projects, I'm familiar with some of them, not all of them. I'm assuming they all have contingencies, and so by trimming back the 5%, we're probably cutting into contingencies in a lot of cases. But are there any of these projects where, they're already so lean that this 5% is going to kind of make the difference if they happen or they don't?
Mayor, as the Treasurer indicated earlier in an answer, there was consultation with departments. There were certain projects that were exempted from the haircut because they were in that situation. And so, you have to fall in an area where clearly some should be exempted. You apply a target to the rest, and what you need to make sure is, because our authority doesn't extend to not delivering the outcome of a project the council's approved the budget for, so that's why in these recommendations we've asked for the response measure, if I can call it that if it is determined that there is a problem with the budget, that the Treasurer has the delegated authority to make an adjustment to put back additional funds in order to, that haircut, in order to complete the project.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then, I guess, just in closing, not so much a question, but I agree with Councillor Harder's statement. I think we can work together to try and mitigate some of this pressure that we're feeling and address some of these issues with outstanding solutions. To the city staff, they work tremendously hard, and I think that we can work collaboratively with them when we get into a situation like this. I know I've spoken to many staff members who feel a pressure. But I think we can work collaboratively with the staff to come up with solutions to help, not just tell them, work harder, do more with less, but work with us on some ingenious solutions to some of these things. And I think some of them have come up with some real great ones. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to work together a lot more closely as we move forward. To the public, we made a commitment to establish a predictable, stable tax rate. And now of all times, we're talking about the economic pressures out there. Now's the time where we roll up our sleeves and try and keep that commitment to the public and deliver that stable, predictable tax rate. Because to Councillor Harder's point, I don't have anyone writing me saying, yes, please raise my taxes. But at the same time, I think there's an expectation for services. So I think the solution lies in working collaboratively with our staff to do exercises exactly like this, to say where can we work tightly, closely, and deliver the projects either at less expense or in a better format perhaps, while still maintaining that commitment to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to follow up on one point that Councillor Taylor mentioned with respect to the Britannia example of the wilderness tours, I think that's a good example of when we go out for our budget meetings, we always get lots of long lists of how to spend more money, but I think we can also encourage and ask our citizens to give us examples on how to create new revenue tools in a community, how to reduce some costs, because they're our eyes and ears out on the street. They see something happening. They may have lived in a different city during their lifetime and said, hey, when I lived in, Calgary, this used to happen. Why don't we look at these kinds of things? So I think we have a collective responsibility to really challenge our citizens to come up with good ways to invest, but also good ways to save and good ways to alter service delivery from time to time. Councillor Monette, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed that there was 5 positions that have not been filled for over 2 years now. Are those positions evaluated on a regular basis as to the need? If they haven't been filled for two years, is there a certain point where you evaluate them?
I'll ask Marianne Phillips to come up and answer that, the Acting Director of HR.
Yes. On a quarterly basis, staff are reviewing the vacancies with department heads and to look at how we can either staff those positions or determine are those positions required or in some other form is something else required.
Thank you. Notice, Councillor Deans had mentioned about the winter conditions and it's changing and it's going to have effects like on a yearly basis. It's it's not going to get any better. I believe when you gave the presentation at the start, you did mention that there would be a report that would be coming to transportation with different options. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, so that's something we'll be able to deal with on an ongoing basis and hopefully find solutions. To the city manager, when it comes to real estate services, I know we have a lot of properties are not being used to the best use of the city at this time. Is there an action plan, or do you plan on putting out an action plan to start moving some of these properties that are underutilized?
Yes, Mayor. In fact, I just met with Gordon McNair on Friday to go over an action plan or a work plan where we're going to be focusing on all city properties in 3 categories: administrative facilities, and taking a look at the current occupancies and comparing those to our space standards to see if there's opportunities through consolidation. We're going to be looking at program properties, so not administrative facilities, but all facilities that are supporting, like Clyde Avenue and others, direct programs, to see what opportunities are there. We're also going to be looking at city facilities that are occupied either in a mix of programs or community use, to see what is possible in terms of properties that we could make available for disposition. All of this to focus on reducing our space requirements or identifying properties that are available or could be forced to be made available for disposition, the goal being achieving one-time revenue, but also increases to the assessment base. So that's coming to Senior Management Committee next month. And that will be part of a whole series of things that we'll be talking about when we table the guideline report later this fall, and in terms of ways that we plan to respond to our budget challenges.
Would it be possible to have a list of, to each councillors as to what vacant lands are city-owned and that could be considered down the road?
We would consult with ward councillors with respect to any properties that we think there's an opportunity to change the status of as part of that process. It's actually part of, as I know you're aware, Councillor, that's part of the city's disposition policy. If what you're suggesting is that we should contact councillors to see if they have any ideas for ones that should be put on the list for consideration, we can do that too.
No, I think what I'm suggesting is I'd like to see a list of all vacant lands that are available, that are city property right now in the city of Ottawa.
Citywide?
Yeah. Okay, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manette. Does anyone who hasn't spoken or asked questions want to be put on the list? Then we'll go back to Councillor Leeper, who asked to be put on the list. Okay, Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will continue. I have a shorter list of questions in the same vein. And I will continue with those while I certainly hear staff's assurance that this long list of adjustments can be accomplished without impact to the delivery of our projects, etc. In that short list that I asked about in the first go-around, I heard about the introduction of risk to the second phase of the registration system, for instance, as a result of this. If we had the community buy-in to moving to the community rink model, those funds would no longer be there. So it's giving me some better color around the implications of these adjustments. So if I may back into the weeds for a moment, in document 4, there's a line item 900-260 under environmental services, where we're proposing to return roughly 32%, a third, say, of the operational loss control program budget back into reserves. Forgive my ignorance, I'm a new councillor. To the best I can tell, that sounds like our mobile waste depots. Can you just confirm that that's what that line item is?
Chair, through you to the councillor, no, it is not that.
Okay. What is that?
I apologize for the obscure title. This was an early genesis of introducing quality management systems into the wastewater and environmental fields. We have progressed internally to the point that many of those same strategies that were contemplated under the operational loss control have now become part of either our quality management system and introduced into regular ongoing operations and incident review. So there is no need for that, but let me make it very clear that this has no impact on the hazardous waste program.
Can I just get some maybe lay language around what that program is to help me understand what it is?
Absolutely. I'd be pleased to meet with you. Can you maybe provide a bit of clarity? Yeah, the operational loss control system, as I say, was an effort at doing an analysis of issues that came up, incidents or problems that were identified in an effort to avoid repeating them in future years. So that was where the operational loss control came into it.
Across like the whole of the environmental services department?
This was unique to the wastewater group at the time. It has since now morphed into our quality management system that's in place internally within the environment, within the wastewater service area, similar to our drinking water quality management system and similar to an ISO system. We have an internal program now that looks at all incidents, be they odor or loss or whatever, and we go through a root cause analysis in order to avoid repeating those sort of situations and either trying to design or operate or procedure out any incidents. So that's essentially what the loss control part of this was, and it has morphed, if you will, in terms of its titling, to be now what's considered to be a quality management system.
And are there any implications to returning 1/3 of the budget back into
None whatsoever, because it's been adopted and moved into the operating environment largely, or there are other occasional smaller elements carried in other pieces.
Okay, thank you. The 905-813, 32% of the total authority for water treatment equipment upgrades back to reserves. Is there any work that won't be accomplished as a result of that adjustment?
There is work, Chair, through you again to the Councillor, there is work that will not be done, but it is not being done because it conflicts with other work that's already ongoing. We start out with a work program set out for the entire year on how we're going to spend. On occasion, some other capital programs or operational programs, don't make as quick a progress as we would anticipate or have implications that additional work must be done. So in this instance, we've looked at this and are very comfortable that there is no consequence to service delivery, and we will postpone some of those things that just simply can't be done this year and return that capital back to the reserve.
But we'll need to, when that work is done in future, we'll need to find those capital in order to pay for it.
That's correct.
Yep. The 20% of the budget for green space acquisitions has been proposed to be returned to reserves. Are there any green space acquisitions that we had contemplated doing that now won't be done, or is it just an opportunity cost? If we did have opportunities, we won't do them now.
Through the chair to the councillor. Councillor, that one specific item was dealing with a property that we purchased. So the purchase has been completed. There was some funds that were retained with regards to an environmental cleanup. What we're suggesting is that the environmental cleanup should be done at a later date, within 2 to 3 years, once they're moving forward with parks to do the park plan. So we're prepared to offer up that money right now, knowing that in 2 to 3 years, whatever's going to be required for environmental remediation at that time will include it within our operational budget.
So to be funded later down the road. And then finally, 906-326, there was a small amount of park infrastructure life cycle renewal money that has been proposed to be put back into reserves. I'm just wondering if there is any park infrastructure life cycle renewal that won't be done as a result of returning these funds back in.
Through the mayor, no, that project was complete, so there's nothing left undone.
So it's just $26K in extra funding in there?
Money left over.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your indulgence. I know that was a little in the weeds. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor El-Shantiri has a technical motion on recommendation number 2. Councillor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On 2015 operating and capital budget Q2 status report, therefore, we resolve that recommendation 2 be amended to read as follows: that any deficit in the constituency services budget related to the cost of living award be funded from the council administration's account as described in this report.
So the deputy clerk tells us this is technical in nature to ensure that members of council and the mayor continue to be responsible for their budget and any over budget is the personal responsibility of the elected official, but the COLA clause is funded from the council administration account. Is that fair, Deputy Clerk? Okay. So on the amendment moved by Councillor El Shantiri, carried. On the report as amended, carried. The next, yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize. We did have Councillor El Shantiri's motion with respect to SAMS that should be put forward. So moved by Councillor El Shantiri, carried. Thank you. The next item, item 6, LRT preliminary engineering. Councillor Deans had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have two issues with this report. And the first one is, there's some lack of certainty about funding from upper-tier governments. Both the province and the federal government are changing the way that they fund LRT projects into the future. And in reading this report, it basically says we'll be into Phase 2 LRT to the tune of about $100 million. And I think before we get too far into Phase 2, we need to understand what the probability is of getting the funding from our funding partners, the province and the federal government. And I had read somewhere, I can't just exactly remember where right now, but I read somewhere that the province was talking about basically backing a loan or changing. If the federal government is talking about that. So can you just discuss where we are in terms of commitments from the two upper-tier governments?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. And as indicated in the report, there is uncertainty in terms of both provincial and federal funding. I think everyone here is aware of the announcement made by the feds, the new transit program that they have. And I just want to draw your attention to comment in the report where we talk about how we will structure the work. There is uncertainty, and so we have made a commitment to structure this work going forward in work packages, that each work package has residual value, so that if in fact the federal funding or the provincial funding doesn't materialize, that we can cancel this contract and still keep the value from the work that was done.
Okay, so that's the $60 million, but it says in the report it's $100 million, so we'd still...
That's what we spent on the Fed line, just as a comparison.
Okay. Okay. So then the second question, I guess, is about the recommendation to sole source a $60 million contract. So that just, on the face of it, sole sourcing a $60 million contract doesn't sound great to me. And I read the report, and I see in the report the rationale for doing that there may well be some advantages. But on the other side of the equation, it's shades of Lansdowne Park to me. If we don't have a competitive process, we don't really know what the market would bear, and if there were more savings that we could drive, especially now we're in a recession. I mean, maybe this is a good time. Maybe companies are looking for work, and maybe there would be a lower price. So I just wonder, from a transparency, from a fairness, and from the certainty around value for money, if it wouldn't make sense for us to go through the competitive process.
I'll start with that. So, Chair, I think first of all, I agree with you in terms of the concern. We spent a lot of time considering the strategy on this at a executive staff level. I can tell you that we also consulted with P3 Canada on it to ensure that moving forward with the sole sourcing on this would not be an issue in terms of federal government funding in the future. We presented them with our rationale. They agreed with it. That's frankly a secondary issue. But the rationale, as the report indicates, is that we're in a bit of a unique situation in that Stage 2 in Ottawa, the next stage of light rail, the next procurement, will be in a scenario where we've just finished a first stage of procurement. And so there's a lot of very different issues in terms of the strategy around building the procurement approach when you're extending an existing system, and there are a lot of integration issues in terms of the vehicles, the switching, a lot of integrated design issues. And so there are risks that can be mitigated by having the same group, the same team that performed that role substantially in the Confederation line to continue through into Stage 2. The reason it's in front of you is, however, I'm just now commenting on your concerns about transparency. I had the delegated authority to award this contract on a sole source basis, but given the size of it and the nature of it, it was my opinion that I felt Council would want to know about this, and that's why this report is here in front of you. I think it's important from your concerns about competitive. What Mr. Byrne will comment on this, but an important part of this is that CTP won this work for the Confederation line through a competitive process, and will be entering into them with a very challenging set of negotiations to ensure that the pricing that we agreed to is based off of what they bid when they won the first stage contract, and that we believe it's reflective of market conditions that have developed since that point in time. Jeff, did you want to add to that?
Well, just following up on what the city manager has already stated, but it's not a true sole source in that they were actually selected through a competitive process, and our negotiations will be based on competitive rates that we obtained in a competitive market, unlike a non-competitive contract. The other information that we have available to us is that we just went out to market this year with regards to our engineering services, so we have a pretty good database of what we should expect as competitive rates for our engineers, and so we'll be negotiating from the base and then using our knowledge of the market that we recently acquired to ensure that we're getting competitive rates.
Okay. I mean, competitive processes are not my bailiwick, they're your bailiwick, and to a certain extent we have to listen to you, but I don't know if I really agree with you that it's not a true sole sourcing because they won a different contract. This is a new contract. I presume in Phase 1 the bidders did not know that they would be given preferential treatment for Phase 2 if they won the first phase. Was there any indication of that in the first phase?
No, there wasn't.
Because if I thought there was more coming because I won Phase 1, then I might undercut Phase 1 in order to get the rest. So I just not. I understand. I read the report. I understand there's probably some benefit of sole sourcing this contract. I understand that. But on the other hand, I don't know if we're really testing what the market would bear or how many other firms are out there that would really want a $60 million municipal government contract that might sharpen their pencils. So I'm reluctant to support this just because I think that there's real benefits of a competitive process, especially with a $60 million contract. Thank you.
Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Shepherd, for offering to meet with each of us in advance. I hope everybody on the committee took advantage of that and had the time to ask you questions there. But I guess to the both of you, the reason that I didn't hold this and that I'm only speaking to it now because Councillor Deans did actually, is the fact that this is a highly technical work, is it not?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it certainly is.
Okay, so I would presume that internationally there would be a limited number of operations that could step into the job, if you will, without having a significant ramp-up period to learn all that this company would have learned after it was chosen the first time. And would that not add extra cost to the value of the RFP?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor, you're absolutely right. There's two components to why we believe that this is best value. And I think Jeff has spoke to the competitive process and our ability to ground their rates to a competitive process. But more significant is the fact that they are uniquely positioned with their experience that they gained on
Confederation line to hit the ground running, and also they continue to work with us on Confed line. So as we continue to learn through the Confed line, that will be immediately transferred into Stage 2. Those are real savings, and you're right, to bring someone else in, you would not at all get the benefit of that.
And it would cost you extra?
It absolutely would.
Unless it was an organization that was applying that wasn't able to do the job in the first place, and that would actually have to add experience prior to the ramping up of learning the information if you were to go that route. Okay, so let me ask you another question, just to put it in perspective. So we have big projects. Right now we're having Greenbank Road with the underpass under railroad track. It's going to take 2 years. Do we send out an RFP to the far reaches of construction industry and allow Johnny Come Lately, for example, to come in with the lowest bid? Is that how we do business on a project of that size? Or do we scope it so that we know that there's only, in the case Kavanaugh was the winner of the contract, and who was it that did Bank Street when we did when Lansdowne? Who was it that did the work there? Greenbelt, yeah. So there's only Tomlinson, Kavanaugh, there's a few of them. So do we, in that case where you have a multi-million-dollar, in that case I think it's about $40 million for Greenbank, do we open it up to all and sundry who might be interested or might be able to bring in enough equipment from someplace else, might be able to provide a lower cost, but absolutely don't have the experience that they can build an underpass that's safe under, railroad tracks, etc. Do the dynamiting that doesn't, impact all the houses around, all of the complications of managing that very large project. How do we manage that?
So generally on the large projects, we would do a pre-qualification, and we would predetermine their qualifications to perform the work before we asked for pricing.
Right. Okay, so I think I've made my point. This is, we had the opportunity to meet with you. We got the information. We know where we are in the project, in the LRT project, Stage 1. We know where we want to be in Stage 2. We want to have the best that we know, have the understanding of the complexity of it to go forward, and that's why you made the decision. And you believe, and your recommendation is that actually on top of all of that good stuff, it saves us money.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kent, for bringing this forward. I would have expected no less due to the complexity and the amount of money involved in the contract. So appreciate you doing that. Having said that, following up on the discussion we had around the potential deficit, this decision seems to me to be a no-brainer. We have an efficient company that knows the territory, knows the project, has the expertise. We'll have a minimal ramp-up to work on Phase 2, can actually save us money, which is what we spent a good portion of this morning talking about, making prudent financial decisions so that we don't have to look at increasing taxes and we don't have to look at cutting services and keeping all of that to a minimum. So based on the commitments that all of us made around the table just a few short minutes ago, this seems to me to be a reasonable first step to take forward in getting our financial house in order. And so I can't see any reason why we wouldn't support this going forward and get Phase 2 underway as soon as we can.
Just thank you. I think the last comment by the chair of the Transportation Committee makes some sense, and that's why I'm supporting the staff recommendation. I think if we all of a sudden, midway through this biggest city building project in our city's history, that we change direction and companies, we set back the schedule, which none of us are interested in setting back. We wouldn't save the dollars, as has been told by our professional staff, and we wouldn't see the continuation of efficiency with the project by simply all of a sudden, midway through, all right, it's now time to go and in essence, change horses. I think one of the reasons why we have been successful both federally and provincially with respect to securing funding and commitments for funding is because we have had our act together, unlike a lot of other cities quite frankly, in the province or the country. And we've been rewarded for that by recognition by the federal government a few months ago. In the last provincial election, the provincial government gave us a commitment for Phase 2. We've had our environmental assessments done. Work is on schedule and on budget for Phase 1. In essence, we have our act together with a unanimous vote of council all the way through. So I would encourage you to accept the professional advice of our Chief Procurement Officer, our Executive Lead on LRT, who has done a tremendous job stick-handling this project through, and our City Manager. It's the right decision to ensure that we continue the momentum to make sure light rail goes farther east, west, and south in our city. So on item number 6, carried, dissent by Councillor Deans. Notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Are there any notices of motion? Any written inquiries, Madam Clerk? Other business? Councillor Deans has other business?
It's an inquiry.
Okay. Do we have a call?
I'll give you one in a second. The recent turnover in senior staff has resulted in a high percentage of our senior management team serving in acting positions in an effort to stabilize the corporation. When can we expect the city manager to provide council with a comprehensive go-forward plan to address the staffing issues within the corporation?
Okay. Adjournment. Carried. The next meeting is October 6. La prochaine réunion, c'est le 6 octobre 2015. Merci. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.